So this has been a long time coming. So Mike, meet Josh. Josh, meet Mike.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Mike wears nerdy shirts like I do. You're the only one wearing all the professional stuff, Joe. I just wanted you to know that.
Well,
maybe that's because you're on 3 podcasts or 10 podcasts or something like that.
Somebody's got to bring the average up.
Yes. But I shave. Mike and I shave. I just want you to know that the non-bearded people outnumber the bearded people on this conversation.
That's true.
I shaved this morning. Do you believe me?
No.
Unless you have a big, huge bite mark on your shoulder that mysteriously looks like a wolf. Or you're wearing the red outfit. Remember the Santa Claus when he kept trying to shave every morning and it kept growing out the beard.
Right.
You're Santa Claus. That could be it too.
So let's jump in here for the listeners, because at this point, listeners probably know that, yes, we have strong connections here. And, I know Josh really well. I know Mike really well. But you two continue to talk about each other on our respective podcasts. So it's only a matter of time before we connect. And thus, here we are. And since we found out that Josh has read the book we're going to go through today, and Mike has a strong opinion on it, Josh seems to have a strong opinion on it, I figured this could be an entertaining time to connect. And I think, who started this? Was this Mike that said that, hey, we need to get on the... One of you tweeted about this and said that we need to connect. Which one?
I think that, yeah, it was kind of my tweet that got things going, but I definitely wasn't the originator of the idea.
Who was the originator of the idea? Was that Joe?
I don't know. I just don't want to take credit for this brilliant idea if it's not mine, and I don't feel like it's really mine.
We need to do is put the disclaimer that Mike and I just showed up. Joe did all the work.
I did all of it. All right. Okay. So for the listeners of Bookworm who are not familiar with theoretical accountability, Josh is my co-host on that show, which is all about everything, I guess. Goals. Theoretically, we're keeping ourselves on track with our goals. That's the idea. It follows a 12-week year, and the intent is that we will help each other meet those goals. We're really good at goat trails. I'll just say that.
Yeah, the other thing that the show is good is tracking Joe's excuses for various problems around his house.
See, why you got to bring this up? Why you got to do that?
Yeah, so I think we should jump right into follow-up right here, and we should talk about how Joe hasn't seen Star Wars yet.
See, I even left the follow-up piece off the outline. I did that intentionally.
I noticed that, but this is the only opportunity maybe that Josh and I will have to take you to task for this, because it is absolutely ridiculous that you have not seen Star Wars yet.
Okay.
I am putting it up there of not reading the Constitution at least once, or the Declaration of Independence at least once, and being a U.S. citizen. I'm just saying, it's pretty bad, Joe. I don't even know. I mean, I'm kind of choked up. Most people know I have words upon words. I have a lot of good and powerful words, and I'm very, very unwordy right now because you haven't seen Star Wars.
I don't know what to say. I have not seen it. Time doesn't allow me to see it right now.
Mike, by the way, I was thinking about putting up a billboard near Joe's house that said that actually plays Star Wars on a continuous loop. So then he will have to actually pay attention at some point and see at least the major scenes, because he makes references. Have you noticed that he makes some references to Star Wars stuff, but he hasn't seen that? That's really bad.
Well, I know, Joe, in the last episode of Whims at Work, you were talking about you might be getting an iPad. So you could get your iPad and you could watch Star Wars picture in picture while you're doing, quote unquote, your real work. And then you could say at least that you've watched it. So I think that you need to buy the iPad in order to watch Star Wars, is what I'm saying.
This whole Star Wars thing is getting expensive now.
Well, it wouldn't get expensive if you just sit down and watch it. I mean, you don't have to buy an iPad to do
Okay,
it.
so tell me when to do this. So I just don't know when the timing is that I would
I'm
do
trying
that.
to enable you, Joe.
I know, you're trying to help me buy stuff. I just bought a bunch of stuff, so...
Hang on. So we've already established, Mike, that Joe listens to audiobooks, but only if his wife is reading them. And we've established that on my podcast. So maybe, just maybe, Joe could have his wife read the script to him while they're driving on their trip starting on Friday. Because I know you're driving, yes?
You could get Star Wars on audiobook format and listen to it on your way to Macstock.
Okay. For every video, so every single Star Wars video combined, how much time is there?
Okay. Now that is a very, very complicated question.
Is this similar to like Lord of the Rings, where there's the extended versions? And
well, it's even worse than Lord of the Rings because there's like 4 versions of each of the original 3 films, like 3 or 4 versions of it. Then there's counting the prequels, which some Star Wars fans count them, some Star Wars don't. Since you've never seen all of them, you could watch it in what is it called? The shotgun method. Have you heard about this, Mike? You watch episode 1 and 2, then you watch 4, 5, 6, then you watch episode 3.
I've not done that.
Yes, that's the shotgun method. Because, spoilers, if you watch 3, 4, 5, and 6 are kind of spoiled, so you don't really want to do that because 4, 5, and 6 are the most powerful of them, aka the originals. There's a lot of different ways you could handle this. There is a cut of the trilogy, the first trilogy, the prequels, that is 30 minutes long that gets you pretty much everything you need to know about the trilogy. First trilogy, which would be then cutting it down. So there's lots of plays and variables here. And really all we want you to do is watch the first Star Wars movie. That's it. You can pick whichever version you want. The first one. Episode 4. Episode 4.
I was going to say, is that 4? Okay.
That's episode 4. Watch episode 4. And if that doesn't make you want to watch 5 and 6, you can go to your Al-Qaeda/ISIS meeting and stop this podcasting stuff because you might want to start recruiting.
Where did that come from?
I'm just saying, if you don't like Star Wars, you've got serious issues. And
you're firing me from all podcasts. Is that what it is?
I think Mike agrees with me. He's laughing. I'm just pointing out facts here.
I agree in principle. I may not agree tactically with the Al-Qaeda and ISIS stuff, but I understand the principle, and I am behind it 100%.
Because it's like people who are in technology who've also not seen... You've seen a Star Trek episode or 2, right? Or do we need to even go there?
I have seen, I think, 2 episodes, but they were like later on, and I didn't understand it because I didn't know all the backstory of it.
But like, I had a friend who developed cell phone technology, but never seen the Star Trek movies, which is the founding of cellular technology. It's true. Actually, the guy who invented the cell phone said, I saw it on Star Trek and I wanted to create it. So... if you go watch the history of so I don't know. It's very disconcerting that I am friends with somebody who hasn't seen Star Wars, which is not necessarily the only friend I have that has not seen Star Wars either. I have several engineering friends who have not seen Star Wars, which still freaks me out. But
so I freak you out?
It does. It really, really does, because it's American heritage. It's American culture. I mean, it's the one of the best things that came out of the 70s. I'm not even counting me in that damn list of 5 things because I was born in the 70s.
All right. I think the lesson here is that you can never fully trust somebody who hasn't seen Star Wars, especially if they're on a productivity podcast. You could say, theoretically, that your team is dysfunctional, which leads us into today's book.
Segue
I don't know if clapping
right
comes
there.
out, but that was very, very good.
So today's book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And this was my pick. This is one of my favorite books. I know this is one of Josh's not most favorite books, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But this is something that really influenced the way that I work and how I view a lot of the teams and organizations that I work with. Now, I have to flat out say here, though, Joe, you had put in the outline that you did the questionnaire based on one of the teams that you work with. I did not do that because I looked at the assessment, I saw the assessment, and I felt bad taking that assessment because I felt like I would be projecting values which maybe weren't necessarily true based on my own personal situation. So I am not prepared to share results of the questionnaire, but there's a lot of principles in here that are worth teasing out. And kind of what's cool about this book is that it's not a traditional book where, especially in the productivity space, for example, self-help, self-management, you've got people who are like, this is the system. All you got to do is follow these 3 things and your life will be changed for the better in only 30 days. It's definitely not like that. The first part of this book is a fable, and there's a couple key elements that he introduces through this fable. He introduces them through a bunch of different characters, and then the last part of the book is the actual, this is how you might actually use this in your own personal situation with your own team. So I don't know, where do you want to go from there? You want to talk about the dysfunctions first? Do you want to talk about the characters? Do you want to talk about why I like the book, Josh doesn't like the book?
I need to clarify. The book has baggage for me.
Okay.
It's not that I don't like the book. It has baggage. And it's a story.
That's fair.
And we will do it later. But I would say start with the dysfunctions, because that's kind of what the fable does, right? At the beginning is kind of go through the team the way it was when the lady joined the team and going where she watched and tried to learn what the team was doing.
Well, I think the rest of our conversation, it's not going to make any sense unless we go through that. So,
okay.
Ready, set, go.
All right. So the story starts with a Silicon Valley startup, which is a fictional startup. It's called Decision Tech. And there's this lady that is being hired as the CEO. And I believe her name is Catherine. And she has a lot of experience, but not specifically in the technology industry. So she's got to overcome that stigma. And she's basically hired because the company should be doing really well. They've got a lot of advantages. They were one of the first to market. They've got a lot of technological advantages, but they aren't achieving the level of success that they believe that they should. So another one of the characters, Jeff, who kind of was the CEO, he's agreed to kind of step aside and let somebody new come in and steer the ship. And she comes in from the auto industry, and she comes and she just observes for like 2 weeks. And everybody there is like, what is going on? Because she's not actually doing anything. And the first thing that she does, other than take notes, is she calls this 2-day offsite for the entire management team, which is kind of not well received because everybody thinks that, well, we're not doing very well, we should be working. But her point is essentially that if we can't function as a team, it doesn't matter tactically what we're going to be doing, the actual work that we're doing. If we're not doing it as a team, it's not going to be as effective. And I think that is probably the most powerful part of this is like, if you can be on a team, and there's a lot of things that you will probably recognize from the dysfunctions in any current team that you are working with. We can get into these specifically, but these are all hurdles that essentially need to be overcome before you can really run at full speed as a team or an organization. And so she, during the offsite, she introduces these different dysfunctions, and they talk through their issues, and then at the end, obviously, everything is good. Some people have left the company because they couldn't get on board with the new strategy. But as an organization, it's healthier and it's moving in the right direction.
And I felt like it was interesting to see that whenever they introduced this change on the management team, that one particular individual realized, I can't cut it, and left. Mm-hmm. And there was another individual that Catherine ended up firing, or basically asking to leave, simply because they weren't playing as a team. Like this particular individual, who was it? Was it Mikey? She was the VP of marketing, I think. It was interesting to me that her attitude in that scenario was one that didn't fit the rest of the team, even though she was like top notch in the sector. Like she was considered like the best in that world. And yet, because she's not playing as a team, that didn't matter. Like she's still going to get kicked off the team as a result. So I just thought it was interesting that Catherine, as she comes in, she's able to see a lot of that and make those correlations.
Have either of you read Creative Inc., the story behind Pixar?
I haven't, but I really want to.
John Lasseter talks about those people that are really, 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 really good, because I work in engineering, and there are people that are like superstar engineering people. They understand everything, but they also don't work with teams. And Lassiter just said, we don't hire those people. Mm-hmm. We don't want people on the team that are the Tom Bradys, if you will, for a football analogy, or the Elon Musks of the business world, whatever you want to say. I think everybody would hire Elon Musk, but
if you don't, something's wrong with you.
There's something wrong with you, but they don't want to hire the really superstars that don't want to work as a team. And that kills a lot of teams, is because the other people feel like they don't need to contribute anything because they've got the superstar guy or girl, whatever the case may be, the superstar personages who knows everything, and they don't have to do anything. And that hurts the team in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and actually they kind of explain that through the story, and they don't explicitly say it, but you can kind of pick up on it where people think that, oh, well, Mikey made this thing, so it's got to be great because Mikey's the superstar, you know. And really, Catherine notices those little things of people just like accepting the work that people are doing and not asking the questions about it. And that's kind of like a red flag in her mind, and proof that they're not really functioning as a team. And on the surface, you can think about that and be like, well, that's kind of contradictory. Like, aren't you supposed to trust your teammates and you delegate the work and then everybody just does it, and then you come together and you put all the pieces together and bam, you've got this awesome thing. But the way that the 5 Dysfunctions lays it out, essentially the conflict is a central element. And so when you just say, okay, is this person, you make this thing, and then whatever you come up with, we're going to wedge that in here. Like, there's no conflict in that process. There's no additional perspectives. There's no chance to ask questions, get clarifications. And so the belief is that kind of the end result is not going to be as good. And I love that you brought up Creativity Inc. Is that the name of the book? I always get it mixed up. Creativity Inc. The one with the picture of Buzz Lightyear on the cover. Because there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of details about the Pixar process, and there's some crazy stuff. Yep, there it is, Creativity Inc. Like, they even talk in there about how they custom designed the furniture for their meetings because they didn't want people to come into the meeting and they pick their position, you know, based on like the hierarchy, like where you would sit. So they actually custom designed tables and chairs and everything so that it basically eliminated that opportunity for people. And I think as you're talking about the 5 dysfunctions of a team and essentially like how do you have a productive meeting, I think that's really important.
Another example of that conflict thing was, if you've read Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath, you guys
did that for the show.
Yeah, you did that for the show. Remember when the CEO of Quaker bought Snapple for $1.7 billion, and nobody questioned it because he goes, he's already made all these really good decisions, so why even bother questioning him? But what made the first decision so good was they questioned him, and so he had to shore up his things, and he's like, okay, and they bought it, and then they sold it in 97 for $300 million. They bought it for $1.7 billion. I mean, they lost
a little bit of a loss.
It's a skosh. That's a skosh of loss. I would have liked to have just taken $1 million off that deal and just had it, just me, and that would have been nice. But yeah, I mean, everybody doesn't. I mean, not every. There's so many people that are afraid of conflict, but they don't understand that conflict is a necessity for growth. Bird, I don't remember which. Oh, it's in Cardone's book. I think it's in Cardone's book that you guys read, which is the birds can't learn how to fly unless they break out of the egg. I don't know if you guys knew that. If the bird does, I mean, maybe it was not Cardone's. I don't remember what book. I've been reading so many books, but if the bird is helped out of the egg by its mother, it never learns to fly, because in the process of breaking out of that egg, it develops its wings so that it can fly.
Yeah, I'm not sure what book that is from, but I have heard that story, and I think that that's absolutely true. And so, I mean, you could apply that to the 5 dysfunctions of a team and an organization in a couple different ways. Number one, if you really want to develop the people that are on your team into the superstars, so if you had a team of superstars that was all able to work together effectively, like, just imagine what you could actually get done. Most teams and organizations aren't there, and they will never get there because, like you said, Josh, like, they're going to avoid that conflict. But I can look back at the times where conflict has arisen and I've had to navigate through it myself. that those are the times, like you said, that really, really grew me. But then also as a team or an organization, there's kind of the same approach, I think, where if you never go through some stuff, like you're limited or you're stunted in your growth as a organization or even as a business. Like if you just enter the market at the right time, you never have to go through any adversity, you never develop any resilience or grit, then you're limited in the amount of success that you can have. But when you successfully navigate those tough times, then that gives you the confidence that you can basically overcome anything.
Well, we've seen this in a lot of different organizations, even when founders hand off to their kid, say somebody starts a business and then they give it to their kid without the kid having to work at it or anything. And the kid just runs it into the ground because they have not struggled the way the owner did building the business. Tested. They've not been tested. By the way, I remembered the book. It was Take the Stairs by Rory Vaden.
That's a great book.
That was the book that had the bird thing in it.
The bird doodad thing.
The bird doodad story. Whatever.
No,
so I totally agree.
We've got, I don't think we've mentioned what the 5 dysfunctions are. So let's run through those really quick because I got a feeling we're going to talk about a lot of them. So I'm not going to go into them in too much detail, but the first one, absence of trust. And you have to think of these as a pyramid. They all build on each other. So you can't go to the next one until you have the first. I mean, you could try, but that might be a dysfunction in and of itself of trying to move on to the next level before you get the first one.
It is.
So the absence of trust, the pyramid, just to clarify, is going from the bottom up if you're visualizing this.
As I'm reading it, yeah. So I'm starting at the very bottom. So the foundation here is absence of trust. On top of that is the fear of conflict. Once you're past the fear of conflict, then you're on to lack of commitment. Past the lack of commitment is avoidance of accountability. And then the very top is inattention to results. And each one of these has, what would you call that, Mike? An indicator of what that is for each one?
A cause or an evidence, I believe, is how they kind of define it in the book. So like the absence of trust, for example, the evidence or the cause of that, the visible manifestation of an absence of trust on your team is that people feel that they need to be invulnerable. They need to protect their job. They need to make sure that they're not going to be held responsible for the wrong choice. And right there, like that got my attention because I've mentioned on this podcast before, like one of the biggest lessons I learned with the agent efficiency team is that it doesn't matter whose fault it is. What matters is how do we fix it? So accountability is not pointing the finger and blaming, Joe, you really messed up this podcast because you didn't watch Star Wars.
You didn't edit it right.
Right.
No, he didn't watch Star Wars is blaming Joe. It's totally Joe's fault.
But accountability is how can we make sure that Joe watches Star Wars so that we can be successful? And I've talked about one specific evidence of that from when we launched the productivity show, because I was responsible for the editing and the publishing of the podcasts, the actual audio files and the WordPress posts at the beginning. And so we were doing some stuff on WordPress, and then I was not in there, but all of a sudden I look on my podcatcher, Overcast, and I get a notification that there's a new episode of the Productivity Show, and I'm like, what? Because I wasn't done editing it yet. And so I was freaking out, and I'm like, well, how did this happen? I'm trying to figure out like who did what, who pushed the button essentially. And Tan basically like cut me off in a meeting. He's like, doesn't matter. Like, how do we make sure that this does not happen again? Because once it's out there, I mean, it's done. There's nothing you can do. You can't recall that podcast episode. But it's so
as much as we wish we could.
Yeah. And I know people do this all the time. There's another podcast I listen to occasionally. I think it's what is it? It's the one with Ben Thompson from Stratechery. And there was an episode which was launched, and then I got another notification saying this is the fixed one, and then I got a third one saying final fixed. So 3 different episodes. It's downloaded 3 different times. So it's my point is that it's common in that people do that sort of thing.
I bet his download numbers were awesome.
Probably. Hey, maybe we should do that.
Just to accidentally release it 3 times.
Yeah. But especially, like I use that story because I think it's a really clear indication of like once it's out there, there's nothing you can do to change what has happened, but you can apply that to any situation. Like you can't change what has happened, but you can change the situation and the system that's in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
So, Mike, you had to read this for Asian efficiency when you joined the team. Is that right?
Yep. Tan made everybody on the team read this book.
Okay. So then is that partially why you think it's such a great book? Because it was when you were joining that team? Or what's the backstory there?
Couple different things, I think. One, I was joining the Asian efficiency team, and the way that they run meetings is I like it a lot better. I'll just say it that way. The way we used to run meetings. And so it was a breath of fresh air, because a lot of times I've been in those situations where you have these meetings and they're meetings just to hear people talk. The 5 dysfunctions of a team, essentially what they talk about in the last part of the book is that the best use of meetings is when something needs to be discussed and a decision needs to be made. It's not to let everybody know about a decision that was already made or communicate information, which is how a lot of people run meetings. Like, oh, let's just get everybody in a room and we'll tell them all these things that we could type up and send out in an email. But that's another rant for another time. So I think part of it was that, and then part of it was just the realization that, oh my gosh, you mean you can have a meeting and you can make decisions and stuff can be resolved like in this 1 hour time frame that you've set aside for the meeting? That just seemed like a kind of foreign idea to me. And then also, I think that conflict is going to be there whether you recognize it or not. So the whole idea of getting conflict out in the open and on the table where you can actually deal with it, I really liked that idea, rather than having it below the surface and everybody just holds their tongue because they don't want the meeting to be extended or they don't want to open a can of worms, that sort of thing. Like I've never liked that.
So I've worked for some of the largest companies on this planet. Yeah, actually I can say that. Lockheed is 200,000 people. The current company I worked for IBM, which was about 300,000 people, and the company I work at now is 20,000 people. And it's interesting how big companies handle things versus different. I've also worked for smaller companies. It's interesting how smaller versus bigger companies handle these things. And take, for example, I worked for a small company and we could have these conflicts. We could have these disagreements and nobody took it personally. But at these bigger companies, the absence of trust is hugely there because they're going through layoffs on a regular basis. So everybody's trying to protect their jobs. And the unfiltered conflict, there's pockets of it, like smaller teams. But when you get in the bigger group, nobody wants to say anything because they're afraid that they'll look like the monster if they say, that doesn't make any sense to me. For example, I was in a meeting. The guy was trying to give us a pep talk, and I don't know if I've told Joe this story, but I've told a lot of people this story. He started the conversation is, at Lockheed Martin, we chemically deafened a cat.
Okay.
I'm not making this up. I couldn't make this up. And he paused. And we're like all looking at, this is when the plant's closing in Minneapolis here in Eagan. And we're all looking at each other like, what is this about? Why are we talking? Why do you leave a pep talk meeting while the plant's
bring this up?
And he goes, but we made it here again with our new nanotechnology division. But nobody would challenge this guy of going, hey, that's not necessarily the smartest idea to start when the plant's closing. Nobody cares about what Lockheed's doing outside of the plant closure. You've just announced the plant closure and you're laying off 1,500 people. I don't know. It's weird how they won't conflict, similar to this Quaker Oats and buying Snapple. Nobody will conflict the higher up people because they're afraid for their jobs. As Joe Mike, you probably guessed, I don't have that problem. I tend to challenge everybody. I was yesterday at my boss. I was sitting there challenge everything they were doing. I'm like, you guys are like managing by using the Force. And my boss is like, that's a Star Wars analogy, by the way, Joe.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification there.
If I need to, the Force is this mysterious thing. I could explain it to you, but it'd take too long.
I get it.
You could watch the movie and it'd be faster.
Right. Sure.
It's like the authors knew how to do story building. Anyways.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that.
Who knew? we're having fun, but it is amazing how the differences on bigger companies versus smaller companies. And I wonder how many bigger companies can still do not have these dysfunctions. Because I mean, small companies, it's easy to do. If Tam owns Asian Efficiency, you can go, this is the way it's going to be. And there's 15, 20 people. But when you're managing through middle management, and when you were reading off the 5 dysfunctions, I'm actually looking at my notes from the book. When you're looking at it, a lot of the middle dysfunctions, the fear of conflict, lack of commitment, and avoidance of accountability, are middle management. And I'm wondering if that inherently, by being, and then the trust is the base, is us workers down here at the base of things. And I'm wondering if because of if there's some sort of hierarchical, when there's multiple levels of a company, that naturally throws this stuff in because nobody can understand from the top down. I this is just a talking point. I don't know. It just seems like bigger companies seem to always have this, but when we go to smaller companies, when I've been at smaller companies of 20, it never seemed to have these kinds of problems.
I think that it's definitely easier to incorporate something like the model laid out in the 5 dysfunctions of a team at a smaller company, just because you don't have a lot of the other variables. I think that at a larger company, it is possible, though. I've not worked in a large company, so maybe it's just physically not. As soon as you start adding layers of in the hierarchy and all the different managers and things like that you just get so many different personalities that it's very, very, very difficult to make that all work. I read a book by Michael Masterson a while back called Ready, Fire, Aim. And he talks in there about scaling up your business, essentially. And he talks about how you can really only invest into 7 people at a time. And once you've invested into those 7 people, they have to then invest in 7 people. And they invest in 7 people, and that's where you get a large teams. And obviously, the more pieces that you add in there, the more opportunities there are for things to go wrong. My theory is that if you are aware of this model, though, like if you were to take these 5 dysfunctions of a team and as your company scales, if this was first and foremost, that you would be able, at least in theory, to communicate this to everybody that you work with, all the managers that would be underneath you. Let's say you are the CEO of the company, Asian Efficiency grows and we've got 100 people. Okay, so Tan is the CEO. He's instilled this stuff in me and the other people who are on the team right now. And then we've got people underneath us. We instill it into them. Obviously, there's more opportunity for error there. But the theory is that there's at least the possibility that as long as we communicate well, as long as we communicate the vision of the company well, as long as Tan is continuing to invest in us, who are like the next level management, and then we communicate to our teams and the people underneath us, that it should be, again, theoretically possible. I've not seen it though.
Yeah. And I know, having worked at a large ag company, one of the things that I know, and something that may be to your point, Josh, as to why this is a problem in bigger companies as opposed to smaller ones, is the smaller ones, like if I take our church, for example, that particular team, whenever I ran the questionnaire towards the end of this on it, that team is like top notch. Like that team is right on track. It doesn't have, as according to that questionnaire, it didn't have any of these dysfunctions, which is really interesting to me. But if I reflect back onto working in the corporate scenario, the difference that I have between those two is that in the church scenario, there's really one team. Like there might be 2, like there's the broader leadership team, and then there's like the technical support team between those 2. But there's really, it's not going to be beyond those 2. Whenever I was sitting here while you were talking, Mike, thinking about how many different teams was I a part of when I was in corporate, and I could come up with 13, and I'm sure there were more than that, as far as how many different, not protocols, but projects I was a part of that had a separate set of leadership and so forth. And because of that, you end up in a scenario where you all have to trust the individuals on each and every team. You have to be okay to challenge things on each and every one of those teams. You have to commit to each one of them. You can run through all these different dysfunctions and make sure you're overcoming them. But at the end of the day, that's a lot of people, and that's a lot of scenarios, and it's a lot of instances where, if I'm successful on this particular project, I have a chance to advance my career, but these other three, they're not going to be an impact. They're a drain on my daily work. And I really shouldn't be doing them, but my boss thinks I should be doing them. So here I am. So I don't really want to be a part of those. And there's no reason for me to be there. And it's very easy to get into those scenarios, not because you want to, but just because you're forced to in a lot of those corporate scenarios. And I'm sure, Josh, you've probably seen this in a lot of cases where you run across people who are just so spread thin across how many different initiatives that you're going to get burnt out on it. And there's always going to be at least one or two that you're not interested in. So eventually that's going to permeate from a political standpoint throughout the teams and the people that you're connected with.
Yeah, there's a ton there. You're talking about the projects that your boss wants to do and you're not really bought into it. That's dysfunction number 3, lack of commitment, generally from ambiguity. But I think the real issue is a lack of communication. A great podcast episode that I recently listened to and made my wife listen to also is the Sean West podcast. It's just called the Communication episode. And so it's Sean McCabe and Ben Tolson, I believe, and they're talking about communication and the fact that because you've said something does not mean that you have communicated. The responsibility is on you as the sender of the message. So from a company or organization perspective, talking about the vision, like it's your responsibility as the owner or the visionary to communicate the vision to the people that you work with. And just because they can recite it back to you word for word doesn't mean that you have communicated it. It doesn't mean that anything has gotten through. And Ben mentions, because he's got a couple of kids in the podcast, that he can tell his kids what he wants them to do, and they'll be playing video games or whatever. And they'll be, oh yeah, sure, Dad. And he's like, what did I just say? And they'll say it back word for word, but they won't do it. And all the other people who have kids said amen. Like you have to make sure that stuff is getting through, and that's like there's no easy formula for that. I think every single situation is different. That's one of the things I got from reading this a second time, by the way. At the very beginning of this, they talk about the very first thing that they did. They used assessment tools to understand each other, and I think they explicitly called out like the Myers-Briggs, but we use at Asian Efficiency the Colby, Wealth Dynamics, StrengthsFinder would be another good one. I think this stuff is so important, and they don't really get into how that actually affects how the team actually interacts. But like one of the things that we do at Asian Efficiency, we've got a monthly video call, and one of the things that we just did, Tan goes through the team page and he highlights everybody's Colby score, and he says, okay, so Mike's a 7 as a fact finder. That means that when you're working with Mike, and he's saying this on the call, he's like, when you're working with Mike, you got to give him facts, and you got to get him ahead of time, and you can't just call him out on the spot in the middle of a meeting. He's got to have time to think about stuff. And if you can identify that sort of thing in any team or organization that you work with, I think that makes the whole communication process way, way easier.
I'm going to disagree on one thing. When you said it's not easy or something, not easy, you said it's hard to solve some of the problems with the middle management, and you were kind of talking about it. You kept, I didn't want to interrupt you because you were on a good soapbox going on there, Mike. Elon Musk just did it. I don't know if you guys seen what his letter that he just sent out to his employees. Did you see that? I see Mike shaking his head, nodding his head. I don't know if Joe's seen it.
You brought it up on the last theoretical episode.
Yeah, that letter. Yeah, and you now have to do show notes. That's why he's writing it down.
Marker dropped.
Marker dropped. That letter cut through all the middle management. Said, I don't want anybody to I want all reported accidents to come to me. Period. Dot. No questions. You send them to me. And that's what you need. If you're going to have to cut through, if you only have 7 people you can communicate with, but at times when things things are breaking down at the trenches, as we say in the corporate world, in the trenches, you must, as a general, go down to the trenches and say, this is what we need. This is why you're here. It's getting into the whole why and everything else, but you need to be able to do that. And that's what cuts through the crap. It cuts through the middle management. It cuts through and actually, even more so, you need to do that once in a while to make people feel that they are working for people. It's the trust building. It's the foundation. It gives people trust in the CEO. The company I currently work with, most people don't trust middle management, but they trust the CEO, which is kind of odd.
Yep, backwards.
It's completely backwards. They trust the CEO, and I've heard this several times talking to people. They trust the CEO, but the middle guys, they're like, yeah, not so much. And I'm sitting there going, how can that be? I mean, doesn't the CEO notice that nobody trusts his executive staff? It's just odd, but it is something that needs to happen. People need to trust that whole chain, and if they can't, then there's a problem.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what you said, and I think the Elon Musk example is a great example. But I also think that that's kind of as a CEO, like you got to know when the right times are to do that sort of thing. It's not a formula. Like if he's sending an email, once a week to everybody saying that, do this, like that kind of loses its effect. But because this is an email coming from the CEO and he never does this sort of thing, I think that the effect is kind of amplified. And I do think that like the situation you're describing is kind of ideal. And I don't have enough big company experience to know how achievable the ideal is. I have studied some big companies, most particularly Apple, and understanding how Steve Jobs worked. I think that most people definitely did not like they feared the CEO, but respect maybe is a different term.
Yep.
Where like, he would the team would be working on the iPad design, and he'd say, make it thinner, and he'd be, we can't make it thinner, and he'd throw it in the fish tank and see those bubbles, you can make it thinner. Like from what I've heard from people who are no longer at the company, like Scott Forstall, for example, he was kind of the middleman, and he would go into the meetings with Steve and be like, here's the thing. And then he'd take the lumps and go back to the team and be like, okay, everything's going to be all right. Yeah, he said this, and this, but I know how this is going to play out, and we'll get our way in the end, sort of a thing. And that's kind of illustrated throughout the Creativity Inc. book as well. They don't really explicitly give a bunch of different examples, but there's the guys that essentially, I'm forgetting their names now, but they kind of partnered with Steve Jobs, and then they were kind of like they knew that Steve Jobs respected them, but still, like a lot of his conduct, they were just like, where is this coming from? And then they would have to take what he told them and go communicate that somehow to everybody that they worked with, and maintain the motivation at Pixar to crank out the next awesome new movie when they'd just been working 20-hour days every single, like 7 days a week for the last couple months to finish the latest Toy Story or whatever.
Yeah, I would tell team. So I work for big companies, and they have their goal setting stuff, and they have all the whatever you want to call it. Each company calls it different, personal business commitments or whatever the goal setting is for the company. And my boss at Lockheed, when I was running the team down in there, would ask me, so who's they wanted ownership on every piece, like all the projects, he wanted ownership. And I said, no, the team owns it. And he goes, but who do I beat up if they're behind? And I go, me. I said, you come to me. He goes, who do I give accolades to? I go, you give accolades to the team. And I've used that as a lot of ways of a leadership, because this 5 Dysfunctions of the Team book really, really requires a leader that buys into them. If all the people underneath that leader buy into them, but the leader doesn't, it causes a problem. So you need to have a leader that buys into the product. And that gets to why I have a colored, jaded problem with this book.
I was hoping you would get here.
You got there. I worked for a company called Mentor Graphics, and we had a small office here in Minneapolis. It's a sales company, all right? So first of all, I'm in a sales organization, which inherently trust is not a big thing in sales companies because it's all commission. So everybody's like out for their own thing. But I was the technical support for a sales team, and I had just joined the team 2 months ago. The manager of the sales guy there's my dogs. My manager in the sales guy ahead of me, my sales guy in that office, comes down and brings in this box of books and says, you guys are dysfunctional. Here is a book that's going to help you to be more functional.
Oh my gosh.
So
here's a slap to the face.
Pretty much. And I had just been there, and she goes, Josh, I know you've just been here for a little while, so I'm not blaming you. So, I mean, I couldn't make this up if I tried. And I said, I mean, I just, that's why it's so jaded. It's kind of like if you get sick at a restaurant, even if it's not the restaurant's fault, but say you got violently sick because of you were exposed to somebody with the flu or whatever, and you go eat. I couldn't eat Chinese food for 3 years because there was a virus that went around the school, and that day we went out for lunch at a Chinese restaurant, and I got sick that night, and that for like 3 days. I couldn't even be around the smell of Chinese food. It wasn't the Chinese food. So this book is a bit jaded because this manager hands us the book and says, you guys are dysfunctional. We're going to go through this book to get you guys functional. And didn't put herself in the boat. She did not say, hey, guys, it's my fault too. Let's all work together and be a more functional team. She said, you. And the minute you say that, it means that the trust isn't there even from you to the, I mean, how do I listen to somebody who's telling me I'm dysfunctional when they are my boss and not leading with example on it? And then we had to have meetings for 6 weeks as we read the book together.
Were they
and she didn't read the book. No. She didn't read the book. Hang on. I just want to let you guys know. She may have read the book at some point, but she led the discussions for like 1 or 2 and then said, you guys can handle the discussions from now on. So this book is jaded simply because of the circumstances by which I got this book. And other than that, this book is fine. I like a lot of the things. I'm on the board with Mike, but it's again that Chinese food after you get sick. So that's kind of the story of why when you guys talked about it and I started pinging back and forth to Mike, why I've had a problem with this book for so long.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. We talked about that with another book. Was it Who Moved My Cheese? That was one of my concerns with it, was that this is the type of book that you could just blanket give to every employee in the organization, be like, here, you need to deal with change better. But my issue with that book was that you're not doing anything as a leader when you just give them the book and say, here, read this. And this book especially, like even in the narrative, like what I love about how Patrick Lencioni wrote this book is that there is so much in the subtle details that he uses. Like there's one point where Catherine is still new and she's talking about, you guys have traditionally done this, and somebody calls her out on it, one of the on-site. She's like, you should not be using you. You're part of this team now. Like they're calling out their boss and saying, you got to take ownership of this. But the situation you just described, Josh, like obviously you don't have the opportunity to do that. And that stems from the fifth dysfunction, which the pyramid model, I like this because when you're talking about how are you going to build this stuff, you've got to deal with them from bottom to top. But you can also flip this around where, you know, if you're talking about how do you scale this thing and you've got to have buy-in from the top, the CEO has to be understanding. They have to have the number 5, the inattention to results. So essentially, I mean, I've just got the story that you just shared, Josh, but it sounds to me like in this particular situation, what you've got is a manager or somebody at the high level who is ignoring the results, and they are hiding behind the status and the ego of their position and saying, you guys need to fix this. I don't have any issues. You're never going to get anywhere.
Nope. And yeah, that's why this whole thing is funny to talk to, because I see it even at the company I'm currently working. There's a saying at this company, and actually they're former IBMers too. So it was at IBM. I think it came over from IBM. The beatings will continue till morale improves.
I've heard that before.
They actually say this in meetings. I'm like, holy wow. I mean, I don't even know where to go from there. If you're going to be beating people up and they know that they're going to be beaten up. I mean, it's one thing if they know that they screwed up. It's an entirely different thing when, like, one of the guys I work with, I bought him the engineer. Have you seen the engineer meme going around? See also wizard, magician, a person who performs exact science with guesswork. It just has this whole thing. And I got him this because he's the guy, he's a savior. He basically goes on programs and saves them. But everybody banks on him. And there's only one person of him. And then they fight. And right now I'm watching this fight go on as like 5 different programs are like, we're failing. We need him. And I'm just sitting there and he's like, wants to help everybody because he does. But he also doesn't want to get beat up. Getting back to the beatings will continue till morale improves. when he's on a program that's already going nosediving and he's supposed to bring him up and he doesn't bring him up, he'll get yelled at and said that he failed. And I'm jumping on the plane as it's going down. That sounds like a good idea. Why? But he will do it because he's been able to pull out so many of them. Like, whew, whew. Mm-hmm. But it's this stuff I see in big companies seem to have a lot of these dysfunctions. Every big company I've ever had has seemed to have the only way to solve it is to have pockets of good. If that makes any sense, where you have pockets of team and that there's a gasket or a manager that sits between them and does not let this crap, I'm editing myself, down in on the team, because I know you guys are a clean podcast.
Bookworm is clean, Josh.
Much appreciated.
But it's even though I really think you guys should go over that one book that I mentioned on the last podcast, even though it would require you guys to swear. It
just came out this morning as we're recording.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I will I'll show him the book.
I've seen this in the list that Amazon throws at me.
Yes, it is absolutely. I've already read it once. I need to read it again. It's absolutely important. But I'm not telling you guys the title. It's a subtle art of not blanking blank 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 blank, and people can look it up.
I'll link it. How about that?
You can link it. Yeah, I don't know if that counts as a dirty podcast then.
No, because you have to read it. It's not me saying it.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm going to go with.
Okay. Well, and on the Amazon, they use stars, so it's not nearly as bad. But I suspect you have to have a manager that can gasket you, because because if the company's too big, you're not going to get everybody in that company to buy in. And that's the thing that even the fable, I love the fable. These new idea in business books of fables to tell stories. Energy Leadership's one, the Go Giver is one. There's a number of them that have these fables, and they kind of tell how the process works with stories and fables, and I really like that. You have to figure out ways to work in the 5 dysfunctions, and the way I've found is to basically have teams and be that gasket code. I mean, gasket management, if that makes sense. I don't know how. I don't know if that. I think that was coherent. Joe, was that coherent?
I think so. I'll go with it. One of the. I'll tell a story here, because I used to work for a virtual company, and I left that company. At the time, I was thinking it was just because this is a bad match. Like the group that I was participating in, I was pushing the envelope quite a bit, and it just didn't work out. And I was asked to resign in that process. So I resigned, so it was technically on my end of things. But as I was reading this book, I couldn't help but try to understand that team, because that's been 2 years plus ago at this point, 2 years ago. And I was trying to relive some of that, which is a little bit painful mentally. But at the same time, I also found it extremely helpful to try to understand it, because what I eventually figured out was that there was a lot of trust building amongst our leadership team. So there was I reported directly to the CEO, but even then I wasn't a part of like the VP team. So I wasn't on that level, but there was a group of, I think it was like 12 vice presidents that were a part of the company. And that particular leadership team, I had very little trust for, simply because I never really knew what they were going to think about the stuff I was kicking out. And working in the ag space and the type of products that I was helping create from a web standpoint were kind of, I shouldn't say kind of, they were cutting edge, and they were really pushing the envelope quite a bit. And it would have really accelerated our company. But, and there's always a big but that comes with this. I quickly learned that there were a number of these VPs that were planning to retire soon, and did not want to go through the process of completely changing how the company operated and how they wanted to be innovative in the industry. They wanted it to stay as it was for just a few more years so that they could retire and cash out pretty well, because they would be taking a risk and a bet with what we were trying to create. And as a result, it meant that I had zero motivation to actually keep going on it. And I kept trying to figure out how to get through to this team and how to help them see that the path we were headed down was, straight into the dirt instead of trying to bring us up into something new and more modern. And I continued to see that. I continued to ask questions about it. I trusted my supervisor in that scenario, and it ended up biting me in the rear because I was pushing it too hard. So it's interesting, but at the same time, I could see that the very foundation of these 5 dysfunctions was not there. The direct team I was a part of and how it correlated to the leadership team, it was a problem, and we needed to break ways.
Yeah, well, I think the situation that you described is the challenge for most people who read this sort of thing is, how do I implement this with the teams that I'm a part of where I'm not necessarily the one who has the authority to change how we do meetings and stuff like that? And I think that's the hard part. The challenge is to insert yourself into this process and get this cycle going, in my opinion. And so that's why my action item here, I'm not sure if you saw this, but my action item from this book is conflict in every meeting. Because conflict is an indication that things are being worked through. The artificial harmony, which goes along with the second dysfunction, the fear of conflict, that's what most people, and I'm projecting, I totally understand that, but a lot of the teams that I've been involved in, I think that the feeling is that as long as there's no disagreement in the meeting, then everything is fine. But really what I got from this book, especially reading it the second time, is that there are always issues. Whether you see them or not, there are issues. So why not create the space where those things can be unearthed, and then we can actually work through this thing. And she's actually, Patrick Lencioni's got a term for this, and I believe that Catherine brings it up in the book, but it's called mining, which is where you're digging for that buried conflict. Because I know a lot of teams that I've been a part of, you could say, well, we're going to get to the bottom of this, dang it, and everybody share your issues, and nobody's going to say anything. So there's an art to digging those things out and drawing those things out. And it was kind of cool to see that as I read the story, that this time, all the different things that Catherine did as the leader to just kind of facilitate the natural flow of the discussion so that these things got surfaced. Maybe it's worth talking real quickly about how these dysfunctions kind of tie together, because they build on each other. So you've got the absence of trust at the beginning, the ability or the belief that you need to be invulnerable. You need to protect yourself. And Josh, that's kind of what you were talking about when you're talking about all these different big organizations, these teams. You got people who are just concerned about keeping their job. In a sales organization in particular, you're working on commission, and if you can get the sale, or at least you can get credit for the sale, even though somebody else maybe did a little bit of the work on it, like that's going to show up on your paycheck. So the system is working against you at that point.
There's another way of saying it, even if you're not in the commission, because somebody will be like, well, I'm not commissioned. You get paid for putting out fires. Somebody goes, even if you start them, you get credit for putting out fires, even if you start the fire.
Wow. Yeah, that's true.
And that happens a lot at companies too. It's like, Joe saved everything because he did the work and he solved the problem. He finally saw Star Wars and the world was right. Nobody gives him credit. Nobody gives him blaming for, Joe, you're 30 years old and you have not seen Star Wars yet. I mean, they just go after the positive thing. And the only reason why I bring that up is when you said your action item, I want to ask, I hate to derail us a minute, but when you said, I need to bring conflict into every meeting, does that also mean every podcast? Because I will say, you guys are much more interesting when you guys disagree than when you guys agree on everything.
To be determined, but
to be determined.
I'm going to put that on your plate, Mike.
All right.
No, I mean, if need to use the Star Wars every time, but until he sees it, then we'll have to come up with something else. But because there's things that Joe and I, when we talk, we don't agree with, and we hash them out on theoretical accountability, and it becomes an interesting topic. My wife actually likes those conversations quite a bit, and I just was kind of curious on your thoughts on podcasting. I mean, I know you don't want to insult guests. I mean, me, you can insult. I don't care. But like, if you say you have David Allen on your podcast, you don't really want to get into the argument over his love of Lotus Notes. I mean,
I may bring that one up. I might bring that one up.
Yeah, that one in particular I feel strongly about, but you're right. I probably would avoid conflict in that particular situation. I think it kind of depends on the desired outcome of the meeting, quote unquote. I don't view podcasts necessarily as meetings, but maybe I should. Maybe I should bring more conflict to book.
And I've actually taken the contrarian approach. So in some meetings with my designers and team members, when everybody was agreeing with each other, I decided to take the counterpoint, and then they had to argue it and shore everything up. Because Joe will tell you, I'm pretty. What is it? I don't know the word.
Quirky.
I'm pretty quick. I'm quirky, but I'm pretty quick at coming up with counterpoints on things, and quick-witted, I guess. But I don't really want to give myself that much credit. But I can come up with the counterpoints. And then they're like, oh, well, yeah, maybe. And then they start thinking about it, and then they start verbalizing their agreements and trying to get that dialogue going. And then after the meeting, one of the guys who works for me goes, Josh, you didn't really believe that, did you? No, I just wanted to see what would happen if you throw in that.
You're one of those frustrating people in the meeting.
Well, no, but not. Oh, I only do that if it's everybody agreeing with everybody the entire meeting. The entire if we have a meeting on, say, should Joe see Star Wars? And everybody's like, yes.
Why is this the topic of every example?
Because it's just an easy one. It's an easy one. But if everybody agrees with Joe seeing Star Wars, and maybe I come at it and go, and it's not Star Wars, it's something else more important than Star Wars, but I may go, what if he doesn't see Star Wars? What problems does that create? Just to see if people...
Zero.
Actually, it does create problems because your two co-hosts, and we might have to get Drew on board on this.
Yep.
Two of your
Oh, really? You're going
co-hosts,
to rope him in too? Okay.
You're going to get hit by... I may even call your wife and go, hey...
I'm hoping she'll at least take my side here.
I'm going to take my entire deep dive session at MacStock and show Star Wars.
Okay. I see, that'll work.
So
I'll do that.
The other option is
Potter about that.
The other option is that I just bribe your wife with bacon. You know that works.
Now you're hitting low blow.
I would hang on. Here. I will promise this on a podcast. It's not on mine, so it may or may not count.
Okay.
I will make you a slab of custom bacon if you watch the first episode of Star Wars. 5 pounds. You get to pick the smoke and cure. I will make this for you. You pick whatever it is. You watch Star Wars.
Is there a time frame on this? Or is it just open-ended?
I would like it before the end of the year. I'd like it in 2017.
2017. Wow. Okay. How long is this?
And this is 12-week years to make this happen.
And this is episode 4, right? That I'm supposed to see. That's the one you're talking about.
The one that's called Star Wars, not the one,
Okay.
not the Star Wars story, not Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It's called Star Wars.
A New Hope, I believe.
A New Hope. Have they started subtitling that one, or do they still just call it? Well, anyway, Star Wars: A New Hope. All right, you will know it because it has. Well, all the openings have.
Can I just search for like Star Wars Original or something like that and get there?
Yep.
Yes, you can do that too.
Okay.
You see it by the end of the year, and for Christmas, I will bring you a slab of bacon. And that way, I don't have to bribe your wife with the bacon to force you to watch Star Wars. You can just do it on your own.
All right. I appreciate that.
Sorry. Back to the dysfunction stuff. Well, I just wanted to ask you. I know, but I just wanted to ask Mike about how does that work when you're doing podcasts, or how does that work when you're. There's the dysfunctions of the team, but there's also the I'm going to say dysfunctions of a dialogue. If there's no relationship. How does that apply to, say you're doing an interview, or say you're doing a conversation with your wife, or because we're all married, so we can say wives, or
and kids,
what have you? How does that all work? What if I know that I can say that you have a mission statement for your family. What does if your wife goes, I don't really like that mission statement. This is why. How does that all work in a family dynamic? Because my daughter's 10 and she has some special needs, as some people may or may not know, if they don't listen to our other podcast or your other podcast, Joe, not our other podcast, your other podcast.
It's not yours.
It's not yours. It's yours. I just
do all
show
the
up
work.
with a mic. You do all the work. My daughter has effectively, they diagnosed her with lots of things, and one of them was oppositional defiant disorder, which meant that she argued about everything. Like everything was a conflict. Even going to the bathroom and various basic human nature things. How does that work with I hate to say normal kids, but relatively, not special needs children. How does that work with your kids? How does that work with your family? Do you let your kids say no? That kind of thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Gotcha. No, that's a good distinction, because when I say conflict in every meeting, I guess I'm viewing this through the lens of actual quote unquote official meetings, because I have this thing where I just hate meetings and I hate wasting time. And so if there is not a clear purpose for the meeting, it's very hard for me to stay engaged. And so really, I guess when I'm talking about bringing conflict to meetings, if I'm going to get quote unquote roped into a meeting, there is going to be some conflict. I will bring it so that there is some progress being made. And as that pertains to a family, I would say that is going to be important. My wife and I have we call it our family meeting, but we meet Sunday nights after the kids go to bed, and we use Asana because that's what she likes to use, and she keeps track of the things that we need to resolve or we need to make decisions on throughout the week. We compare calendars, we go over the budget once a month. Like, that's the place for that to happen. And I do think that there needs to be conflict in those meetings as well, because when you're talking about as a family, maybe it's just my situation, but I'm projecting probably not, where the tendency can be to decide something and be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And what you're saying, Josh, if I'm hearing you right, is that what do you do when somebody doesn't really, they've got a differing viewpoint? Like, how do you resolve that thing? You can't just say, we're going to go in this direction and assume that everybody is going to follow rank and file and be, yes, all on board. One of the things that they say in the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is that there's got to be weigh in before there's buy-in. And I think that conflict is essentially where people can weigh in. And even if the decision that collectively is reached is not what you personally want, the way I view that is that you're okay with it because at least you've been heard. But in a family dynamic, essentially what I want to avoid is me being the person who is making the decisions. I want to include my wife in that process, because she can say, again, going back to communication, she can say, yes, I'm on board with this decision. But if she's not really on board with the decision, if there is disagreement and there's not the alignment, the 2-horse rule, if we're not pulling in the same direction, it's going to be evident pretty quick. And a lot of it is trial and error, adjust and repair. Like, we've definitely made mistakes in that sense, but then going back to like, how do we fix this? I think one of the things that you were touching on, Josh, when you were saying that you sometimes take the opposite viewpoint, another way to do that would be the whole idea of like the postmortem, but doing it before the thing actually happens. It's called a premortem. I forget which book I read that from, but I actually just did that in one of our meetings for a ministry team that we're involved with at our church. We're planning this big outreach, and we're going to show up at this apartment complex, and we're going to have like this big block party, free food, free games, free everything for all the people that live there. And we're going through and we're planning all the details, and yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then I asked the question, like, okay, so what could make this be a failure? What are the things that could make this not go the way we want it to? And you could kind of see people's focus, like, oh, I didn't think about that. I just assumed everything was going to work well. But when you start thinking that way, you get a lot of you see a lot of things that you wouldn't see traditionally. And I think that that's the value, is understanding the different perspectives, the different viewpoints. And that gives you a more complete picture. But I think that tactically, maybe there's different ways that you can do that. And this is all, like I said, kind of trial and error. I don't know that bringing conflict to my family meetings is going to be a good thing. I guess we will find out.
Good luck,
maybe
Rachel.
that's a follow-up. But it doesn't have to be.
I'm sorry, I just
fisticuffs.
I just made this to that. No, agreed. There's no need to be fisticuffs. But along with the conflict, what about the kids? I mean, I don't. My daughter's 10. I think your kids are older, right? Too. You're not the Joe show of everybody's under 5, right?
No, 9, 7, 5, and 3.
Okay. Do you let the kids have a say in some of this stuff? I mean, not necessarily budget. I understand that, but I mean, like,
that'd be a bad idea.
We haven't. That might be a bad idea. You have a whole bunch of fidget spinners. I heard a story of there's a big gaming convention in Origins called Origins. It's second largest in the country. And two guys brought 5 giant duffel bags of premium fidget spinners. And they rented a small booth space, like the smallest booth space they had. They just loaded up the fidget spinners on the in the bucket and said, you get to draw something for like $20 or whatever. They sold out within 2 days. The con was 4 days. They sold out 4 giant duffel bags in 2 days. So what I mean, but so you don't want that. But the kids, do they, like, we have let Alia, my daughter, choose sometimes restaurants, choose sometimes things, because we don't care. Not care is not the right word. We're allowing her to have those choices so that she can learn those. You're indifferent, or it's not. Whatever choices matter. I guess indifferent works. But do you let that with the kids? Do you how does their conflict? I mean, because I'm more interested, because there's a lot of people like you two who listen to both your podcasts that are solopreneurs or something, so they don't have this team dynamic. But I'm trying to figure out how this book relates to interpersonal skills besides just the team in a corporate setting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess my kids are kind of like they're younger and they're getting older, so they haven't gotten to the point where they're making like really, really serious, important decisions. I'm going to go out with this person or anything like that yet. But one of the things that we've done is we've tried to involve them in the decision-making process. And then I think a big part of it is listening, honestly, because the tendency can be that, especially if you work outside of the home, like you've got all these different responsibilities, you come home and you just that's when you're going to relax. And if you're not careful, you can just tune out and you can miss a lot of real important details. But and like I said, my kids are young enough that they will still respond when I say, how was your day today? What did you do? And from there, a lot of conversations can be launched into like, well, this happened and it made me feel this way. Well, what did you do about that sort of thing? This kind of gets back into the discussion on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that we were talking about, because he's got a story in there where he's trying to essentially lead his son into a specific role. And then he gets the epiphany that, maybe he's not a baseball player. Maybe we should let him decide his own thing. And he kind of finds his own thing and he's really successful at it. And so that is a challenge. I don't know that I have a formula for that, but I will say that my wife and I are very cognizant of that. And we're trying to be careful that we don't just say like, well, this is what we do. Like each one of our kids is individuals. The 9-year-old is like athletics comes really easy for him. He's a natural basketball player, natural soccer player. Like he loves it. Our 7-year-old, not so much. So it is a challenge to figure out like what makes each one of them tick. What are the things that bring them life? What are the things that they love doing? Our 7-year-old is very artistic. So while the 9-year-old would grab a basketball and go shoot hoops for 3 hours, the 7-year-old would be content just to color with his colored pencils. And he's an amazing artist actually, or build with Lego or whatever. So I don't know how to answer that question on a podcast necessarily, but I will say that it is something that I'm aware of and to a certain degree worried about because I don't want to mess it up.
I think all of us, and I mean, Joe is still farther behind us because I have a 10, you have a 9, and Joe's oldest is a 4.
Yes.
But I think all of us don't want to screw up our kids.
It's true.
I think we all 3 of us realize that we can, and so we want to try to do this. And all I wanted to bring up was, because if you give your kids permission to unfiltered conflict,
yeah,
they're going to be like, no, No, I don't like that. I don't like that. You mean this bedtime thing? Not a fan. Brushing the teeth? Not so much. Taking a shower? I'll wait till the dirt cakes. I mean, these are the
Scrape it off.
Scrape it off.
Yeah.
But I mean, the achieving results, they focus on achieving results. I don't know. I don't know if this even works for family, but the focus on achievement of collective results is, as a family, is kind of interesting. Somebody once told me that, and I don't know if this makes sense, but a family is the only form of socialism that works. Because you're all working for the collective good of the family, and you're not like, I mean, that the whole point of socialism in Marxist view was that we all work together to make our country the best country, but that really doesn't work when you add 10 million people. But if you have a family of 5, 6, 8, maybe it works. And maybe maybe the dysfunctions also show up in that sense too, because if you have a small team, to round it back to the 5 dysfunctions, if you have a small team, it's easier for all of you to see a vision, easier all of you to see where you need to go. And I don't know. Sorry for derailing, but
no, that's a great point. And actually, on our list is something that my wife recommended, which is another Patrick Lencioni book, and I'm trying to pull it up right now. It is 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. So I think there's probably a version of this. I personally have not read that book. But I'm guessing that there's some of the principles from the 5 dysfunctions, because this is actually a derivative of the 5 temptations of a CEO. And so I think that there's probably definitely like elements of the 5 dysfunctions that work with a family, but there's probably some things that are different that Patrick Lencioni, who has taken the time to think through, and I don't necessarily understand off the cuff, but I do think that the cycle in some way, shape, or form still exists inside of any team. You've got to have number one, the absence of trust. Like specifically talking about kids, what I am trying to do is make sure that when my kids are in high school and they're faced with these life choices, that they trust me enough, that I've made enough deposits in them by that point that they can feel comfortable talking to me about things, and not in a way that I'm just going to be like, well, this is what you do. This is how you fix this. Because I do have a tendency to do that. But just being able to have a conversation and know that they're not being judged, and give them, like you were talking about, Josh, the rein to, or the ability to make their own decisions at that point. They also have to, like the second dysfunction, they have to know that when they talk to me about stuff that there may be conflict, that's okay. They can't have that fear of conflict. There can't be the artificial harmony. I think that there is definitely artificial harmony in a lot of families where just like, well, the kids aren't complaining, so everything's okay. No, when your kids are quiet, that's when you know things are wrong. And then I think that kind of leads into the rest of it, though, because if you have those conversations, and I think more is just creating the culture for those conversations to take place than it is formally having the conversations. Like, okay, at Monday at 7 p.m., you're going to download all of your issues and we're going to fix this. But having the ability or the feeling that they can do that at any time, that's when they come in on board with the family mission, and the third dysfunction, the lack of commitment. That's how you overcome that, in theory anyways. Like I said, kids get older, kind of figuring this out, and a lot of it is trial and error, adjust and repair. But then you've got the number 4, the avoidance of accountability. Like if you've laid the groundwork, I think that's a lot easier to uphold a standard. And anybody who has kids knows that you can't just say, for most kids, like, just do this. Especially as they get older, they're going to question, why? Why do I need to do this? Why do I need to make my bed? And having a good answer for those things requires that foundation of trust and the ability to work through the conflict. And then they got the commitment and the accountability. And then you can look at the results. And you can say, okay, this is, and that's also where you can start to work backwards too. Like one of the things that my wife did just this week with my kids is they brainstormed all the different things they want to do this summer. And they made like a summer bucket list. Okay, so those are the results we want to achieve. And I was even just last night talking to my 9-year-old. Like, he doesn't understand all the financial stuff, but he understands that I work hard so that some days I don't have to work hard, and we are able to do the things on the bucket list. What makes me able to do that is the fact that I am going hard at these things for these specified time slots. And he made the observation, just in casual conversation, he's like, yeah, it's really sad how some people, they just don't really understand what they're working for, and so they end up working all the time. I'm like, whoa, revelation from the 9-year-old.
They do have those from time to time, these brilliant things, and you're like, wow, how'd you get... Whoa.
Yeah.
That's good, dude. That's good.
I mean, there's that.
Put that in a tweet and send it.
what was the show? There was the Kids Say the Darndest Things or something like that was a show for a while. But they do say things like, man, Dad, that guy's fat. I mean, things like that where you're like, oh, please, no, don't say those things. But they also say these brilliant ones that you're just like, You're 9. Can I record this? Because like I want this for later.
Yeah,
Josh, I really appreciate you making the connection to families, because one of the only thing I wrote down for action items was head knowledge ? Because I don't really lead or work with. I mean, I've got the church thing, but I'm not really leading.
You're the leader on
anyway.
our podcast. You're the leader of our podcast.
And this is partially why I'm glad you brought it up, because it's more of a relational connection, like taking some of the aspects that make a successful team and making the correlation to a relationship. And how do I have an interaction with another person, another human being? And a lot of this applies to developing a deep relationship with someone else. You know, if you think about like our marriages, that's a lot of the same thing. Like all of these are something that we all go through in our marriage. So I am glad that you made that connection. I'm not really sure what to do with it right now other than just be aware of it and just try to apply that. I don't have anything specific that I think I want to nail down on that, but it's something I think it's at least interesting.
One thing I think is really cool about this whole discussion is one of the items I put on here was the definition of politics. And most people think of office politics, like corporate organizations. But the definition of politics from this book is when people choose their words and actions based on how they want others to react rather than based on what they really think. And I think that totally applies to families. It totally applies to any team or organization. So that's kind of my... not necessarily an action item, but talking about how do you apply this to the teams and organizations that you work with. Number one, I want there to be conflict. I want there to be resolution of things. Number two, I want to avoid politics, according to this definition, on every team that I am involved with.
Correct, but I don't... How do I say this? I don't think politics are bad. We use it as a bad term. We use it, and in that context, maybe it's more bad. More bad is bad English, but... But politics, I mean, the definition that, all right, let me say this. The definition that it said of getting people saying things or doing things depending on other people's opinion is very, very important in culture. Like if you and I both are in Toastmasters, if we go in and at the speech contest wearing holy jeans and a t-shirt that says Metallica on it and not showered in 4 days, we may want to do that, but you are doing exactly what you're taking a shower. You're playing. I hate to say playing the game, but you're doing the things that need to be to make other people comfortable. There are times when I swear a lot, but there are times when I don't, like on this podcast and various other things, where I know that that's not the appropriate response. And I'm not doing that because that's not lying to who I am. And I've learned this through speaking. I take heroic public speaking through Michael Port, and he talks about dials. And I would agree that you don't want to not be you, but there's ways to dial things left and right, not left and right politics wise, but left and right. I mean, I'm trying to describe my hands. Turn your dials various different directions. That, hey, I'm in this, so I need to be this way. Oh, I am here, I need to be that way. They are changing your dials based on your audience. And I don't think that's a problem. I have a hard time with that part of that definition.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. Like, there's societal and cultural norms that you are going to adapt to, and I wouldn't necessarily classify that as politics. The thing that stood out to me from this definition, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but it's when people choose their words and actions based on how they want others to react rather than based on what they really think. So I think when I read this, that part of the equation is missing. So you are essentially a lemming in the cultural or societal machine where you are conditioned to respond a certain way, and you don't even think about responding the way that you actually feel. I appreciate your restraint in not swearing on the podcast, but recognizing that that is in you, like, that's an important piece. Like, you have to have the authenticity of this is who I really am, and that has to weigh into the equation at some point, even if, like you said, there are certain arenas as this plays out where you are choosing to dial that back and act a certain way.
Correct. But I will tell you this, if it comes to my daughter's safety, I will act in any way possible to keep my daughter safe.
Yep.
Including yelling at the top of my lungs so it makes it feel like I'm scared, so that she senses that, oh crap, maybe I should not be running out into the middle of the street without my dad. Who knew? That kind of thing. So I'd be careful when people sit there, because then people use it as an excuse to be a not nice person. I use another word normally, where, oh, I'm just being honest. When I tell you you're ugly, I'm just being honest with myself.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, no.
Keep your mouth.
No. Keep your mouth. There's no need. Now, if my wife comes up to me, and my wife has learned to come up to me and go, does this, I mean, not just makes me look, she never has ever asked me that, but do you like this dress? And I say, or this outfit? And I say, no. I say, I don't like it because of X, Y, and Z. She's learned now that she only asks me when she really wants my opinion, because I'll tell it. But you know what I mean? I struggle with the idea that everybody needs to be honest all the time. And I used to be. Mm-hmm. I would get in trouble at work a lot. My performance reviews would be a lot of, you shouldn't have said that. And
you were going to get an A+, and now you're going to get a C.
Yes. But the dials, I mean, not even just based on society norms. You know that talking to your child in certain ways gets certain responses. Be careful with using honesty as a weapon, I guess is the right word here, is what I'm trying, because you can turn that knob all the way to the one side and really, really hurt a lot of people, even though it's honest. Yeah,
no, totally agree. And I think that the balancing part of that is the fact that, I mean, the title of the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, like the team, focusing on the results of the team. Again, not having a lot of corporate experience, but at least the way I view this is that is what balances a lot of the things. Like, you can say, well, yeah, I've got to be honest, but if you spilling your guts in the wrong arena about the fact that you can't work with person X, that's not helping the team, then I would say, like, that's a very simple barometer to measure whether the response is appropriate. Is like, how does me doing this thing, acting in this way, whether that self-interest style is turned all the way up or just a little bit, like, how does that actually help the team is a very important piece. And I think the point of the book is trying to make is that if you go through the 5 dysfunctions, a lot of times you can not offer stuff because you artificially, like, you might say, well, I don't want to cause a big fight. I don't want to focus on the negative. I just want to be a team player. But if you never, like, take care of your individual stuff, if that never gets resolved, then you really are being selfish. It's your own fear of conflict that is keeping the team from achieving their resolution. We didn't really get into all of the characters, which is fine, but there was one person in here which I thought was really interesting, which is Carlos. And the description of Carlos is that he spoke very little, he listened intently, he was low maintenance, and he was trustworthy. He was the guy who would show up and just try to keep the peace, and he would work really hard, and he would put out the fires like you were talking about. But when it came time to the meetings, he really wouldn't say anything. And, like, this is the kind of guy that you want to know what he has to say. You want to know what those problems are so that you can resolve them. And obviously at the beginning, like the team is so dysfunctional that he's not saying anything.
So we've been going at this for a while. Let's switch over to author style. So what do you guys think about the whole process of having a fable at the beginning and then wrapping it up at the end?
I liked fables. I've been enjoying these books that have these fables. I think Energy Leadership does this, I think, in a better way, in the sense of it does a part of the fable and then does a lesson. And if I remember right, Dysfunction was all... I read this a couple of years ago, and I have all my notes for it.
Yeah, it's all tied together in one. Like, you get the whole fable, and then it's the full explanation.
Yes, and I would rather have broken that out, of having some of the story, having the lessons from that story, having the sum of the story, having lessons from that story. Energy Leadership does this. The Way We're Working Ain't Working, I think it's called, or The Way We're Working Isn't Working.
Tony
also
Schwartz.
does. Yes, also does this, where they do that, because the story is what ties it together. And if we could learn as they'd learned and bring out the lessons, I thought would have been a better play. But this was also future. I mean, this was what, 10 years ago this book was written, 15 years ago?
Yeah, at the end of the book, there's kind of an afterword of, since I wrote this, the events of September 11th happened. So that's obviously 2001.
Yeah. So this is probably in the forefront of doing this kind of deal where you're trying to use a story, which is so funny because it's cyclical, right? Aesop's fables and all the Grimm Fables tables were all trying to teach people lessons and through a story. And then we went to all these business books where they here's 400 pages of all the examples of all the project management badness. And now they're going back to this idea of a fable, which I really enjoy. I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, I really like the fable. That's a good point that you bring up, Josh. I'd never really thought about that as an option, I guess, of interjecting the descriptions of the 5 dysfunctions as they come up. I'm not sure that I would prefer that. I could definitely see value in that, but I actually really like how the story just keeps going, essentially. And I've got this book I've got a hardcover version, which I have read a couple times. I've also got the Audible version. And so the fable part of this is something that I can see myself going back to over and over again and having it all in that section of the book all at one specific time. I could see that being beneficial as I want to review a lot of this stuff. Because like I said, when I read it the second time, a lot of the stuff I picked up on was not the major 5 dysfunctions, but all the different little interactions. I guess I really understood that better the second time, that Patrick Lencioni really has an understanding of these different dynamics. And you see that in some of the details, and he doesn't even bother to call it out a lot of times. But I think that you could read this, listen to it, whatever, over and over and over again, and you could pick up something different every time. Also, something very entertaining about the audiobook version, by the way, is that one of the characters, Martin, I believe, is British. And so the reader does a really bad impersonation of the British guy whenever he talks. Yeah. But I really like the format.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it. I have been enjoying the books I've been picking up lately that have the story side of it. Maybe that's Josh's fault with putting me on fiction at night. But I really liked it. Patrick's got a very easy to read style. What was I read another one. I grabbed it here earlier. The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job, which is one that I read when I was a part of that virtual company I talked about earlier. So it's interesting to me that they wanted to bring that up, and yet I felt like it was right in the middle of that. But that style is one that I really enjoy. So that all of that leading me to a rating of sorts. I ended up putting this one at a 4.0. There are a lot of things in it that I love, and I love the story part of it. And it seemed like whenever I got past that and got to the nonfiction side of it, like the non-fable piece, it seemed like he rushed through it and didn't really explain near as much, which is probably okay, but it still frustrated me a little bit. I wish he would have spelled some things out in a little more detail so that I could flush it out mentally in more intricate ways. But he didn't do that, and I really wanted him to. There you go.
So the real question here is, did you rate it a 4.0 just because Josh is on the podcast and would take you to task if you did a 4 or 5.
No. I try to be as honest as I can with it.
Okay.
I don't have that much power. Remember, I just show up with a mic.
If I don't like what he says, I edit it out. So
yeah, there is so much stuff on the edited floor from Theoretical Accountability. You guys don't even know.
You guys need a B-sides.
There you go.
All right, Josh, you want to go next?
All right. From a leadership perspective, so I have to give this 2 ratings because the context in which it was given to me is like a 2.
Fair
Just
enough.
from a PTSD kind of mode, but from a context of what it's talking about and the message it's giving, I probably am with Joe. It's a 3.5 to a 4 because I totally agree that a lot of teams suffer from this. My problem is that he really does not give you much in the way of how to solve them, especially when it comes to larger teams like I work at in big companies where there's 150 people putting out a chip or what have you. How do we get that going in that kind of venue?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And to be honest, I'm not sure that formula could exist in a book format. I think there's a lot of little subtext that, like I mentioned, I picked up when I read it the second time that I missed the first time. It's no secret that this is one of my favorite books. I definitely empathize with your situation and how it was given to you, though, Josh. And I have learned, because I will go to half price books every once in a while, and they'll have like multiple copies of this. Whenever I see that, I buy them all, and I give it out to people who I believe are interested in this sort of thing. But I've learned to even be selective in who I give this book to, just as like, this is an awesome book, not projecting it as you've got a dysfunction you need to you need to fix. But I also totally understand how that sort of message can come across as well. But I absolutely love this book. I like it even better after reading it the second time. And this is one of those books that I think every time I read it, I will get something else out of it. The same cannot be said for something like Getting Things Done. And for that reason...
You mean you don't want to talk about Lotus Notes? You don't want to talk about... I mean, come on, man.
No. A lot of the books that we cover on Bookworm, I feel like they are very prescriptive and they present their views. And once you understand like the main ideas, you understand the message, which is why a book like Getting Things Done, you've got the essence of the book in the first 75 pages, and then he spends the next 300 pages telling you what he told you to make it stick. I really enjoy this book because that isn't the format. It's kind of, you're right, it's not prescriptive, but I think that would completely change how I feel about the book as well. Because as soon as you make it prescriptive, you've added another 400 pages on how do you actually have a productive meeting? How do you work with other people that you don't like? That sort of thing. How do you balance all these different personalities? I absolutely love this, and probably no secret that I'm going to give it 5 stars.
Not at all. I knew it was going to be a 5-star book from you before we even started recording.
Yep.
When you say I absolutely love this book in a tweet before you even read the book as the gring, I'm like, yeah, it's a 5er. I'm thinking about starting a betting league on Bookworm's rating process. The only problem is that you guys would look at it and then try to throw off the numbers, and that's the only.
You would probably have me build it, and I'll skew it.
We control the algorithm, so.
Yeah, I know. But you guys really haven't read any books that are low. That's the one thing I would like to see you guys. I mean, not
what do you call low?
I mean, 2 or
The Shallows.
I would say we had some like 2.5s at one point. So.
Yeah, but Shallows. But the problem is, you guys tried to make it sound good. You're like, and then
tried.
I sit there and Joe, was it a good book or not? He goes, don't read it. I'm like, oh, okay, but I'm just trying to understand because you were sitting there, you guys were talking it all up, and I'm just like,
well, there were some decent points, but you really had to dig to find them.
You had to dig to find them.
And then
See,
everybody likes
the
to talk
goal
about
of
the good
Bookworm
points.
is to tease out the good information from these bad books so that the listener doesn't have to go through the process of reading them.
And if they're good books, you should read along.
So I have a meta book for you guys. Have you guys thought about doing Tools of Titans, Tim Ferriss's notes from the podcast? Then you guys are doing the podcast on the podcast, on the book on the podcast. And it's like this weird cyclical thing. I just thought of that as an idea. Metacycle.
Can you imagine the show notes for that one?
No.
Joe doesn't have enough to do, so we absolutely need to do this.
I'll be building a robot to auto note the episode.
I picked that as one of my Gap books one time and read the first couple, and I'm like, there's no way. It's like 600 pages.
What you do is you just go and find the topics you're interested in. He actually had to release a different index because they didn't want to release the index that really would work. So he released a 30-page index as a PDF, which indexed based on topics. So you can go, hey, I want to learn about knee fitness. And you can go look up knee, and then it will tell you the different people that had knee suggestions. It's actually a really good index if you
That's
get a
cool.
chance.
I'll have to look at that. Yeah, because that would make way more sense than the way it's broken down in the actual book.
Absolutely. So I will let you guys finish up and close up your show.
Yeah, so next book's coming up. The next one's my choice, The Power of a Positive No by William Ury. This is one of those that I feel like has been talked about quite a bit, and I have no idea why I've not read it. And it's time for me to read it. So I'm going to drag you along with me, Mike.
All right, fair enough. My book after that is actually one that I started reading, and we totally have to talk about this one. It is The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli. Are you familiar with the concept of a cognitive bias?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a 300-page book, which is broken into about 100 3-page chapters, each one covering a different cognitive bias.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Is it biased?
It's fascinating. No, it's basically just pointing out that like people, when they make decisions, they have these cognitive biases. And so like, there's an example. You're making this decision and you might view it this way. That's a cognitive bias. And obviously, like when it comes to cognitive biases, recognition is the first step. You know, G.I. Joe, now you know, knowing is half the battle. Joe, you may be too young to remember G.I. Joe also.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
He might not know what it is. You might need to explain it.
I'm good.
It was a cartoon where at the end of every episode they would have like a public service announcement, like always wear a helmet, and it was like this little 30-second thing, and then they would always end it with the tagline, "Now you know, and knowing is half the battle."
Absolutely.
This is becoming the What Joe Don't Know show.
I told you that's what you need to have. You need to have that show.
So I need a fourth podcast?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, thanks.
You got to find somebody else to do all the work.
I know. So whatever that one is, someone else is doing the editing for it.
So if you ever, Mike, if you ever want, I don't know if you've seen these yet. I'm going to show you two books that are along the lines of Thinking Clearly. It's by a guy named, I can't even pronounce his name, Ali Al-Musawi. Have you heard about this one?
No, I have not. Illustrated book of bad arguments?
Yes. It's all about logical fallacies and how people use them as logical fallacies. He followed it up with basically cognitive biases. Book. It's all about cognitive biases and how algorithms can get you over cognitive biases.
So the book's called...
That's awesome. Bad Choices.
The second book is Bad Choices. But they're all illustrated, so it's kind of... And he has some really cool illustration type things. So it's one of those books. I know you guys aren't Kindle fans. I am. But there are books, and I've shown Joe my library. I have a lot of books that aren't, because there's a lot of books that don't show up on Kindle well because they have art in them and everything. So, well, I didn't mean to bug you guys.
Books. What do you got for a Gap book? What do you, like? I've got one. I picked it up here a little bit ago called The Machine Stops. This is interesting because it's about a civilization that has essentially left the surface of the earth. It's a science fiction thing, and they go underground, and they can bring anything and everything to their fingertips with the push of a button. And what happens when the machine that runs all of this shuts off? It ties into smartphones and the internet, even though it's a short story written in 1909. So it's very prophetic in that sense.
Interesting. Yeah, that sounds kind of cool. I may have to check that one out. My gap book is Talk Like Ted by Carmine Gallo, I think is how you pronounce her last name. It's essentially a book about the 9 different characteristics that she identifies that really good TED speakers possess. And so as I am trying to continue to become a better public speaker, this book was kind of highly recommended.
So I have to ask, do you talk funny? What's star rating? We don't even talk much about it besides what'd you think?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I would say probably 4 stars. I felt like there was a lot of really good stuff in there. The writing style was a little bit distracting to me, but I totally understood the points that the author was making, and there's a lot of value there. I really liked the idea of practicing your jokes. That's not something I typically do, and it's something that I kind of teased out as I want to do that before I give my talk at MaxStock actually in a couple of weeks. I want to not just show up and wing it and not just present information. I want to make a conscious effort, especially in the keynote presentation, to incorporate humor. And I will definitely be rereading that book as I prepare for that talk as well. It was really good.
If you ever want to have a virtual rehearsal over Skype or Zoom or whatever, let me know. I'll help you out.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Because this is what I love speaking. And if you ever want, I have a whole shelf of about 30, 40, 50 books on speaking.
And which one are you reading right now? Like, what books are you going through right now, Josh?
I'm reading. So I signed up for Amazon deal of the day. It's like $2 books, and so I'm reading a fiction book called I forget. Mirrorwood it's the second book in the Mirrorwood series. It's a fantasy novel. The books I'm reading for nonfiction are what's it called? Getting to Know, which is a negotiation book that was recommended after reading Never Split the Difference, which is probably the best negotiating book I've ever read. And then I'm reading some role-playing game books. Yes, I play Dungeons and Dragons, people. I am that sorts of geeky. And I am also, for speaking books, the next one on my list, here it is. Oh, I'm reading a book on fasting because I'm learning about the health benefits of fasting because I am a large bastard and I want to not be so large.
Sounds like you're going through a lot of books right now. Speak Like Churchill.
Stand like Lincoln.
Yeah. Cool.
There's also a thanks for the feedback that I'm kind of quasi going through, and thank you for arguing. Thank you for arguing. If you want to have a book that's about arguing really well and understanding the points of arguing to the point of making it an art form, Thank You for Arguing is awesome.
So Josh.
Yes.
Where do we find you online? Like where you want to send people?
Theoretical Accountability. It's this lame podcast I'm a part of. The producer is a total tool. No, just kidding.
I love you too, Josh.
Yeah, I know. That's a podcast I have with Joe. And on Twitter, I am SHOUIT. It's Showit. It's my internet handle since 95. So a long time. And then I have a website called joshrensch.com. And then the website everybody likes to go to is baconstratagem.net, which shows people how to make custom home smoked bacon.
It's very good.
Which is very important.
I can attest
It's very,
to that.
very important. Yeah, Mike has not had any of my bacon, mainly because I gave it to, by the way, Mike, I want you to know that I gave some to Joe, and I'm assuming that it never got to you.
It barely made it 2 days.
It definitely did not get to me.
I don't know. Are you a meat eater? I mean, I'm not trying to judge or anything. Like, I have several friends that are vegan, so I don't care.
No, I like me some meat.
Do you like bacon? Do you like bacon?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Next time I know that you're getting together with Joe or you're coming to town, just let me know 10 days ahead of time, and I'll make some bacon for you, or I'll make sure I have some.
That sounds
bacon.
Awesome.
Yeah. Once you have my bacon, though, the problem is you really don't want to go back to store-bought bacon. Do you, Joe?
It's It's difficult to go buy it. Yes, I'll say that.
You're in a new bacon bracket.
Mike and I will be together for MacStock. When is this? 3 weeks? 2 weeks? I don't know how long it is until MacStock.
It is. Let me look at the calendar. It is
you should come
July
to that.
15th
Can I still go?
and 16th.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you can still go.
You can still buy tickets?
Mm-hmm.
It's in Chicago?
Woodstock, Illinois. So close to Chicago. It's actually the place where they filmed the movie Groundhog Day.
Oh. Okay. And then I can get to meet Brett Terpstra.
Yep. And John Voorhees and lots of other really smart.
Is Max Sparky going? Does Max Sparky go? Mr. Sparky?
He has not been there. Don McAllister is usually there from Screencast Online. I don't think he's going to be there this year. I'm not sure who else is on the speaker lineup, to tell you the truth. Chuck Joyner from Mac Voices. A lot of people from the Mac community. It's a fun time.
Okay, I may have to come. It depends on the stage of the project and everything else, and what my wife gave me permission to go see HBS Heroic Public Speaking live for the second time. So that's a large sums of money. So I don't. Yep. How much is Max stock? You're not paying for it because you're keynoting. So what is Joe? What are you paying?
$100, $200,
Oh, that's it?
Something like that. Yeah, it's not expensive.
Oh no, that's not bad at all. Because my HPS is $1,000.
No, it's not
to go for 3 days.
Not even close.
So not even close. All right. Well, I will thank you guys for letting me be on this podcast. It's a very deep honor. I've been listening to you guys for a long time. I have. I've been listening to Joe since he had What You Know, Joe. Really should be titled, I haven't seen Star Wars, so I really know nothing.
I wish I could throw something at you right now.
You guys understand, Joe and I'm not meaning this in any way mean. And it's fun. And then, Mike, I've been listening to you since Asian Efficiency. And when you joined that team and you were on the podcast with Zach, and then you took over the podcast. So it's kind of cool that it is cool that I get to meet you guys and get to talk to you guys on this podcast, and people get to hear me.
Fun times. And for the listeners, if you are following along with us, or you're paying attention to the books that we've been a part of or going through, and you have one that you want to recommend, Mike mentioned one that his wife has recommended that she wants us to go through. You can do that if you go out to bookworm.fm. /recommend. You can see a form there. You can fill out and recommend a book to us through that. If you want to see the ones that we've been through, the ones we're planning, the ones that other people have recommended, you can do that at /list out there as well.
If you want to help other people find the show and dethrone KCRW as the #1 return when you search for Bookworm in iTunes, please go to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. It would really help us out. And if you want to join in the conversation, you can do so at productivityguild.com.
I have one thing to say. I have reviewed your podcast, Mike. Have you reviewed our podcast?
Ooh.
Guilty. Have not.
Okay.
There's my action item. Put it on the list, Joe.
So, Josh.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for letting me be on the show. This is a great honor.
It's good to finally connect you two. I feel like I've been the third wheel between you and not being together.
You've been the telephone. We've just been picking you up and sticking you to our ear. And then get the message to Joe. Get the message to Mike. Get the message to Josh. Get the message to Mike. That kind of thing. So
it's a good time.
All right.
It's a good time. Glad to have you on.
Thank you. And you guys keep having an amazing podcast. And hopefully Mike reviews us so that we can dethrone nobody else, because nobody else decided to take our name of theoretical accountability.
It's all ours.
It was too long.
So for the listeners, if you're reading along with us, The Power of a Positive No by William Ury. That's the one to pick up next, and we will go through that one next time.